Welcome, everyone, to the Truth About Cancer's Global Health News. I'm Ty Bollinger. This is my lovely wife, Charlene.
Hi there.
So today's show, we are going to have some fun talking about hoaxes, health hoaxes. I wrote a book several years ago. We called it Monumental Myths of the Modern Medical Mafia and the Mainstream Media and the Multitude of Lying Liars that Manufactured Them.
What a name. That's a long name.
It's the longest title in history
Yes.
of a book.
But we like it.
We were sitting around trying to think of a name, and
He's good at
the
that.
alliteration started rolling off. So that was what it was called. But basically, what Monumental Myths covered is a lot of things that we've been lied to about, and we kind of try to uncover the truth. And that's what we're all about, is truth.
Right.
So what we want to do, Mike Adams published an article here within the last month or so it's called the 10 Worst Health Hoaxes Pushed as Science Over the Last 100 Years. So we thought this would be interesting to go through because Mike's another fellow truth seeker with us, and he really gets it on a lot of these issues. So what we're going to do today is this episode is going to be totally dedicated to just kind of going through these health hoaxes and find out what's the truth about them.
Right. And so as we go through these, we want you to start thinking outside the box. We know most of you already do, but this may be a springboard for you to think, wow, I was told this. Is that the truth? And that's what we're all about, the truth. We're just lights shining in the darkness, and so are you, right where you are at. So what's the first one, Ty?
Well, the first one here is lie number 1. If a health study is peer-reviewed, then it is evidence-based, reliable, and true.
Ooh.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? That's the gold standard. Peer-reviewed. Is that peer-reviewed? Well, we're finding out now, and there's been several articles published over the last few years and these are by mainstream medical journals, that are indicating that up to 90% of the information that's shared in peer-reviewed medical journals in those articles is either inaccurate or completely fraudulent. So 90% of peer-reviewed medical journals may not be telling you the truth, which is kind of scary because that's what people rely on. That's what doctors rely on, right? Doctors rely on peer-reviewed medical journal articles to figure out what's true and what's not in medicine. And if the peer-reviewed medical journal articles are incorrect, then the doctors don't know what's up.
It just seems like a big scam, and it's not like it's just a toy that they're scamming you on. It's your life. It could potentially be your life. And so that's really important to understand that 90% is a big chunk. That's an F minus. So we need to rethink how we look at medical information outside of that peer-reviewed box.
Yeah, and one of the things that we learned from Dr. Russell Blaylock in the Global Quest, he shared that there's a lot of what's called ghost articles that are written. And so what happens, people don't understand that with medical journal articles, in order to get published, they've got to have a medical doctor's name attached to them. So what happens a lot of times is that pharmaceutical companies will hire writers to ghostwrite articles about maybe their latest drug. And then what they'll do is after that article has been ghostwritten, they'll shop around and they'll find medical doctors that maybe aren't published or haven't written many articles, but that have an MD after their name, and they'll say, hey, would you like to publish this article with your name attached to it so that you can be a published doctor? And at that point, many of the medical doctors will say, sure. And sometimes they get compensation for it as well. And so then that article gets published. It's got a medical doctor's name on it, or maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or more. It was not written by those doctors. It was written by the pharmaceutical company, got a doctor's name attached to it, and then it gets published in peer-reviewed medical journals as the gospel truth, when in reality, you're not all that unbiased if you're writing an article about your own products. So here's lie number 2. You want to read it, hon?
Sure. Let's see. Lie number 2. If a food additive, prescription drug, or immunization is approved by the FDA or the CDC, then scientists have tested it thoroughly for safety and efficacy, and you should consume it without question. No questions, please.
That's interesting too, because it lists food additive, prescription drug, or immunization. So let's talk about those 3 real quickly. First of all, food additives. How many times have you looked into the ingredients in a packaged food and you've seen red dye number 5 or yellow dye number 40? I think, or maybe I'm inverted the numbers. But these colorings, they're known carcinogens.
But they're in our food.
But they're in the food, so that's not safe.
The M&Ms, right?
M&Ms that are colored.
Our children, and the Skittles.
All those candies are colored with artificial colorings that we know cause cancer.
And that's just one ingredient.
That's one ingredient.
The coloring.
So we talk about that. Prescription drugs, right? The FDA admits on their own website that 100,000 people die each year from drugs that they've approved.
Properly prescribed.
That are properly prescribed.
Prescription drugs.
So we can't rely on that being safe either, because we know that people die.
Ty, what if that were raw milk that someone got sick off of?
Yeah, if that were it,
because we don't know of any deaths from raw milk, or for that
some
matter.
people got upset stomachs, maybe. But if that was a raw milk manufacturer, we've seen this in the past. There was a dairy in California called Rawsome. They were raided a few years ago with literally with agents with their guns drawn
SWAT teams.
that confiscated all their computers, stole $100,000 plus of cash, and they basically shut down the owner. And then they took him to jail and they basically tortured him because he was selling raw milk.
Well, did anybody die from that raw milk?
I don't think anybody. One of the charges is interesting, if I remember correctly. One of the charges against them is that they had mislabeled cheese. Mislabeled cheese, so they came in with guns drawn. So
Wow.
it's a double standard. It's not the same thing. Wouldn't I mean? Can you imagine if Rawson had said on their website, 100,000 people last year died from our raw milk? Would they still be in business?
They'd
No.
be in jail for life.
Be in jail for life. But
Executed, probably.
the FDA does that every year with drugs they approve. 100,000 people
Well,
die.
I think maybe they're a threat. If you're healthy, you don't need the drugs. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, maybe it does. Maybe it does. And lastly on this list, immunizations. Basically, they're not really immunizations. Vaccination is not immunization. Immunization is your own body's response
Yes.
to encountering a pathogen or a virus or bacteria, and that's the response. You immunize yourself. You get healthier. Vaccination is not immunization, but vaccines have not been proven to be safe and effective. We covered that in the truth about vaccines. They're not safe. And they're not effective. They're effective at creating an antibody response.
And there's no studies to prove that they're safe.
There's not studies.
Effective.
As a matter of fact, on the package insert for most vaccines, it says has not been tested for carcinogenicity, does it cause cancer, or mutagenicity, does it damage DNA. They openly admit we haven't tested to see if it causes cancer or damages DNA.
And some of the adverse effects on the package insert have been SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, and that's a whole another topic. There's autism linked to that.
Anaphylactic shock too. Charlene's talking specifically about the Tripedia vaccine for Sanofi Pasteur. It's a DPT. It was taken off the market I think in 2013, but they actually said on the package insert, adverse reactions include SIDS, anaphylactic shock, and autism. Now they took it off the market because parents started saying, "What? You're admitting that this DPT can cause autism?" So they took it off the market. But we know the DPT can. We know the MMR can. The CDC knew the MMR could.
And it was funny because, I don't know if you remember this, but a few years back when that was still around, Ty, in his amazing world, researching and pulling this stuff out of nowhere, finds this package insert, makes a screenshot of it, and we put it up on our Facebook at that time, Cancer Truth. Now, if you don't already, follow us on The Truth About Cancer. But we put that screenshot of those and highlighted those three things that he just mentioned, the SIDS and the autism. And we had a lot of people from Big Pharma come in and comment and say that just absolutely was not true. And it's been proven to be true. But the social medias, there's a war for your mind. It's an information war. And so I think that we're winning. We're really proud of you out there for sharing this life-saving information.
Yeah, absolutely. So continue to share. That's one thing we ask you, if you'll share this information, please. Share it with your friends, with your family. Just refer people to the Global Health News, help them to wake up and watch this, because we want people to be healthy. That's the bottom line.
I mean, we started losing Ty's side of the family, mother, father, grandparents, uncle, cousin, and learning the truth. We want you to know the truth. We want you to live. We want your friends and your family to live. So that's why we do what we do. And we know that you're sharing with your friends and family because you also want them to live. And we're glad to have you here.
Yes, we certainly are. Number three lie is cigarettes are good for your health, right?
Oh boy.
Good for digestion, recommended by over 20,000 doctors in America. Yes, they did do that in the 1950s. You can still go out there, and if you Google different photos, doctors and cigarettes together.
Lucky Strikes, wasn't that one
there
of
was
them?
there was Lucky's,
Camels?
Camel, Pall Mall. There's a lot of different
Doctors
brands.
say they're good for you.
Yeah, doctors said that they're good for you. Doctors said that cigarettes will give you improve your digestion. As a matter of fact, I even saw one that said a pack a day keeps lung cancer away.
Wow.
So that was a lie. We know that the tobacco industry knew that was a lie, but they still perpetuated those lies on us. Much the same way that I really believe that we'll look back on this time with vaccines and say, can you believe they were actually vaccinating people and saying it was healthy? Chemotherapy, the same. Yeah.
But tobacco is a plant. I believe, based on our research, that the cigarettes that people smoke, the conventional cigarettes, are laced with a lot of chemicals. And so it's really those chemicals that are the biggest detriment to your health and to your lungs.
Yeah, the Native Americans have been smoking tobacco for millennia. And there's very little incidence of lung cancer. And the reason is it's natural tobacco. There's not pesticides on it. There's not insecticides or fungicides.
And
It's
added
not
chemicals.
moldy, and then the added chemicals
Hmm.
to the cigarettes. So it's really the chemicals in the cigarettes that are causing the lung cancer more than just the tobacco. Now, granted, it's not good to be heating something and inhaling it on your lungs, but regardless, I don't believe that that's actually what's in cigarettes that's causing the cancer. It's the
Right.
chemicals.
And if actually it's so addictive, those chemicals are so addictive. I've talked to someone in particular, a lot of people, but one person that I love dearly, I said, you know, if you want to smoke your cigarettes, it would be much better for you to roll your own, get organic tobacco and roll it with good paper.
Yeah.
And she said to me, she said, but I love the chemicals. I love those cigarettes. I can't do that.
They're addicting.
Hmm.
They're addicting. Okay, line number 4. We're making pretty good time here. Let's see, we're about almost halfway into the show, and we are on line number 4, so we're pretty good timing here.
Awesome.
Yeah. So line number 4, the polio vaccine is a miraculous invention that stopped polio. Okay. Again, we talked about vaccines just a couple of lies ago, but the polio vaccine specifically. Here's what's interesting about the polio vaccine. The CDC played some dirty poker on the polio vaccine because in July of 1955, when the polio vaccine was introduced to the world, the CDC changed the definition of polio. So what used to be a very broad definition that almost anything that involved a temporary paralysis and even symptoms that weren't paralytic symptoms would be lumped into this big broad category called polio. And then in July 1955, they introduced the first polio vaccine, and the CDC changed the definition of polio to where it's much more narrow. So there weren't as many cases of polio. Even if there hadn't been a vaccine introduced in 1955 July, there wouldn't have been as many cases of polio because they just changed the definition. It'd be like if over 300 pounds, it's 6 foot over 300 pounds, you're obese. And there'd be a lot of people obese at that point. And then they said, you know what, now you got to be over 400 pounds to be obese. Well, that would have eliminated a lot of people from being obese. Well, what happened? They just changed the definition of obesity. It's much the same way that the CDC changed the definition of polio. So, and on top of that, I don't want to harp too much on the polio vaccine. There's 2 other problems. Number 1 is we know now, and the CDC even admits, and I got a screenshot of the cdc.gov, that admit that the polio vaccine was laced with simian virus 40, and that's been linked to lymphoma, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and other cancers. So one more thing, Dr. Jonas Salk, who invented the live polio vaccine, he testified before Congress in the 1970s that over the last 2 decades, every case of polio had actually been caused by the vaccine. Polio was not wiped out by the vaccine. Polio got a change of definition, and at that point, very few cases of polio happened after that because there was such a narrow definition of what fit into polio. And on top of that, what used to be called polio was now called aseptic meningitis or acute flaccid paralysis. And what we saw after July 1955 is those diseases which before almost nobody had, now they skyrocketed. Why? Because polio never got wiped out. They just changed the definition of polio. And these other diseases were created, and it made the bar graph of polio look like the vaccine wiped it out when really it didn't.
That's a great explanation, Ty. People need to understand that. And you're so good at explaining that. So I hope that if you didn't get all that, rewind and listen to that again, because that will be very helpful for you in explaining to your friends why the polio vaccine is not what they say that it was.
Yeah, and also one more thing about polio before we get off the subject. If you look at the incidence of polio and the use of DDT, they almost coincide. So DDT poisoning, which they sprayed DDT all over the place. They'd spray it
children.
They'd spray it on kids in schools and in swimming pools all over the place. They'd spray DDT in the 1940s and 50s. When they stopped, the case of polio started to decline. And this happened before the vaccine. So DDT poisoning, very much similar, is very much parallel to polio symptoms. And so that was part of it as well. So it's the changing the definition, also the removal or stop using DDT. Polio, you know, the cases went down for a couple of reasons, but it wasn't the vaccine. All right, line number 5.
Artificial sweeteners contain no calories, right? So you can drink as many beverages that are sweetened with artificial sweeteners or eat as much food with artificial sweeteners as you can, right? I feel good about that. Do you?
Well, it depends. Okay, so there's a couple problems with artificial sweeteners. Number 1, they don't actually contain no calories, most of them. So for instance, stevia, which we love.
We do love stevia. We grow it actually. It's a great herb.
It's a great herb. But on the package, the brand of stevia that we use, it says each serving contains less than 2 calories, which according to the FDA is dietetically 0. What does that mean? it means that there can be up to 2 calories per serving. Well, if you use stevia like you use sugar, and there's some that are equivalent, so you can just, like, if it took 1 cup of sugar in the directions, you would use 1 cup of stevia. And I think ours is. If you use stevia like you do sugar, then in a typical recipe, you might add anywhere from 200 to 300 calories in that recipe from stevia, which is supposed to be 0 calories. So that's one problem. They're not really 0 calories. They're under a threshold, but when you take that, in one serving is usually maybe a teaspoon. So if you take 50 teaspoons, you just add 100 calories if it's just under 2. But that's not the main problem. The main problem with most artificial sweeteners.
Right. I was just thinking that is you've got aspartame, you've got
Splenda.
yeah. Now, all those different sweeteners are causing a plethora of disease, cancer, MS, and just even weight gain. It's just our bodies were not meant to consume these things, and we can thank Donald Rumsfeld, right?
Rumsfeld was the head of GD Searle when they got aspartame approved into the food supply in the 1980s.
Right.
And they knew, the scientists had known for a decade that it was causing holes in the brains of monkeys, that it was causing all kinds of brain damage, causing cancers, causing tumors. They knew this. They actually ate holes in the brains of some of the monkeys they tested
And
on.
they did not want to approve this, but through Rumsfeld, it happened, and to many people's detriment in their health. And we're sorry about that, but we hope that you have put all those artificial sweeteners to the side and help your family to understand and to do the same.
Yeah, and if you want to drink a diet soda or have diet sweetener, use stevia.
Right.
It's better. And if I drink a diet soda, it's going to be a soda sweetened with stevia.
And we don't drink those every day because even the carbonation is not great for you. But if you're having a party, a kid's birthday party, and all the kids love sodas, do not do the conventional sodas. Go get Zevia, and there's others that are sweetened.
Yeah, and if you do, drink a lot of water afterwards. So
yeah,
I always drink
mitigate
several cups of water afterwards because it'll buffer the acids that are in a soda.
Yeah, and he's good about drinking lots and lots of water.
I drink lots of water. Okay, so now, line number 6, any high cholesterol is bad cholesterol. So here's the deal. Cholesterol gets the blame for heart disease and for atherosclerosis, which is hardening the arteries. But really, it's a repair mechanism in your body that comes to the rescue of damaged arteries and veins. So when you're eating a really poor diet of processed foods, lots of sugar, processed foods, flour, or, processed white foods, right? Like the sugar, the rice, the flour, all the whites that
And
have been
sugar in excess.
Yeah, excessive sugar. That can actually create lesions in the endothelium, and it can create lesions in the interior of your arteries that is creating damage. And so what the cholesterol is a repair mechanism in your body that comes to patch up the little microscopic holes in your arteries that can be created by a poor diet. So cholesterol gets the blame. People say, oh, you got high cholesterol. We have to get you on statin drugs to lower your cholesterol. Well, the problem's not the cholesterol. The problem is you're eating a really crappy diet,
the sugar,
most likely.
The processed foods that cause the problem.
And so the cholesterol gets the blame, but it's not the problem. The problem's your diet. And to be honest with you, you look at what's called the French paradox. In France, they eat a diet that's full of butter and cheeses and oils and breads and all these things that people say, oh, they're so high in cholesterol. But you know what? The French almost never get heart disease. But they eat a diet that's just off the charts in cholesterol foods.
And their brains are healthy.
Well, why are they not getting atherosclerosis? Why are they not getting heart disease? Because they're not eating the processed foods that are creating the damage that the cholesterol then has to go repair.
Yeah.
So again, there's a cause and effect with these things, and we're looking at the effect instead of the cause a lot of times, and the effect is cholesterol.
And they use a lot of cream, a lot of the rich fattening foods, but a big difference is that their servings are so much smaller too.
Yeah.
The small servings, if they do have a pastry, which they're very famous for their pastries, they're very small, so they don't overindulge. It's a treat.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. We've lived all over the world, and in America, we have huge servings. We literally will sit down and eat. One person will have a serving that a family in another country would eat.
Yeah,
The servings are so much smaller, what we've seen.
I knew a guy, he came from one of the Caribbean islands and he moved to America, and he went to one of the restaurants that served chicken, and it prided itself on being so healthy. And when he was describing the first time he saw the portion, he was laughing. He could not believe that anybody could eat a half a chicken. He was like, that's a half of a whole chicken these people are eating. That is insane. So yeah, our portions are way bigger than they need to be. We don't need a whole lot of food. We just need the right food and nourishment to keep our bodies going.
Yep, absolutely right there, honey. All right, we're almost done. We've got a few more minutes left.
TikTok.
We got to go. Lie number 7, all saturated fat is unhealthy and causes cardiovascular disease. We just dealt with the cholesterol. It's the same issue. Saturated fat, that's not true.
Coconut
Butter,
oil
if
is
it's
great.
coconut oil is great. Saturated fat, butter's great for some organic grass-fed cows. It's
For
not
raw milk is the best.
Yeah, the fats, and here's what's interesting. The American Heart Association recently came out and said that coconut oil was not healthy for your heart. But they're the ones that recommend genetically modified corn oil and soy oil and other vegetable oils to be heart healthy. Why would you listen to somebody that's so blatantly wrong?
And they're making money off of that industry.
Yeah, they make
so
money
it's a
off
conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
And coconut, they can't grow the coconuts here. They're not harvesting them here. So there's a little competition there.
There is. That's true. There's a lot of competition in that. But the reality is saturated fats are really good for you if they're from clean sources. It's all about the source, and it's all about the way that the fats are manufactured. So if you're taking a healthy oil and you're modifying it or you're heating it, then you can damage it. So it needs to be the extra virgin,
so
the
what
non-heated,
does
the
that
non-trans
look like
fats.
Right. What does that look like in your house or our house? I'll give you an example. I just talked to Bryce, our son. He loves the Olive Garden salad. Who doesn't, right? That's a great salad. Italian, yum. Well, I was at Costco the other day, and we love shopping there because there's so many organic options. I picked up the Olive Garden bottle to look at the ingredients, of course, like we always need to do. And the first thing I believe on there was soybean oil. So I put it right back down, and I have a recipe for a homemade dressing that is just like that. If you want it, get on Facebook, Truth About Cancer. Let me know, and I'll come up with something for you to give it to you. But it's a great recipe. I even have homemade mayonnaise that I put in there. All of the ingredients are top-notch organic. So you can have these delicious foods. You just don't have to know how to make them. Use the right oils and stay away from the bad ones, which soybean, even organic, is not good for you.
True.
But if it doesn't say organic, it's genetically modified on top of not being good for you.
Yeah.
Lie number 8. Who out there has been told milk does a body good? Right?
Well, our perspective is it depends upon the kind of milk. So if number one, it needs to be organic. If you can get raw milk.
And out there, I just have to add, I did a Facebook Live, I think from Cancer Truth, or one of our Facebook pages. I went to a local fresh produce market, and he had raw milk on the shelves. And of course, here in Tennessee, they have to say it's for your pets. Isn't that absurd? But I got some raw milk and brought it home, and now I have a new source for raw milk, which was really exciting. You can find raw milk, you just have to look around. I believe most places have farmers that sell raw milk.
Yeah, some places you have to buy it for your pets, but raw milk's best. If you can't get raw milk, at least make sure that it's organic and don't overdo it. But milk does create inflammation, and that's a problem with a lot of chronic disease. So if it's not organic, don't buy it because it's going to contain milk from cows that have been injected with antibiotics, that are eating genetically modified organisms, and hormones. It's going to be really bad for you.
And your children, we've seen little girls mature way too quick because they're getting those hormones that they shouldn't be getting. So it's a disaster. This generation is really the first one to experience a full diet of GMOs and all these antibiotics, which are really messing up their systems, and the hormones, which are so unnatural. So if you could just do organic on everything that you do, or most things, there's some things you have to do, like milk and cheese products.
Yeah.
You'll do well.
Little baby steps, just baby steps. Do the right thing and just continue to do
These
more and more.
GMOs, the organic milk and some of the produce needs to be organic because it's heavily saturated, like strawberries. You have to get those organic because it just sucks in that.
Yeah.
Some of the things you can wash off, but that.
And she mentioned GMOs, so that's slide number 9. GMOs are safe, they're drought resistant, they're increased yields, and so forth.
Right?
That's not true. Number one, all the studies have shown in the last few years that GMOs actually produce smaller yields, not greater yields, so they're not great at feeding the world. The study also, the main study that was performed by Charlene study, you may have heard of it, that showed that GMOs cause cancer. Now, it was published in a medical journal that eventually retracted it.
Of course.
Okay? Now, here's what's interesting about that. Monsanto carried out the study. They used the same kind of rats, the same number of rats as Charlene did.
But the difference
Was what?
They went past 90 days. Monsanto pulled the plug at 90 days. Charlene's study went all the way to 2 years.
Yeah, and by 2 years, what Charlene found is that the genetically modified corn, specifically Monsanto's, was causing tumor and early death and sterility in, I think it was over 80% of the rats that were studied.
And as animal lovers, such as us, and probably you too, it was really heartbreaking to see these poor little rats with the tumors that were as big as their whole body.
Yeah.
That's what happened to these rats, and if it's happening to the rats.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not like big rat fans or anything. I mean, but it's just it's you know, it's hard to see. They're experimenting on these animals, and you know, you're seeing the effects of these genetically modified organisms on not only animals but people now. Where the rats proved that it causes cancer. Now, here's what's interesting about that study. That study was retracted from the journal that it was published in, and just within the last week or so, we've learned that one of the authors of that study, or one of the editors of that journal, was actually on the Monsanto payroll at that time. So there's a total conflict of interest, and he was one of the main people that got the study yanked. And so again, we're looking at money. Money is what is driving a lot of these decisions. And so don't let anybody tell you that GMOs don't cause cancer and they're safe. They're not. Charlene's study proved it. Okay,
and
lie
if you
number
want to
10.
learn quickly more about GMOs, just go to thetruthaboutcancer.com, and we've got a lot of information there for you.
Yeah, truthaboutcancer.com. Okay, we are almost at 30 minutes, but we got to finish this. Slide number 10. Chemotherapy is your best chance of defeating cancer. Watch the Truth About Cancer series.
Yeah, if you've been following
we know that's not true.
Our work, we had the
Chemotherapy
first episode.
contributes at a 5-year survival rate. The study that was published down in Australia shows that it was 2.1% contribution to a 5% survival rate in Australia, and I think in the United States, the contribution to a 5-year survival rate was 2.3%. So it's not effective, and it actually damages tissue, and it's chemical poisoning.
Right, and we've covered the history, which is really important for you to know. Before you can springboard forward to understand even more, the best foundation you can get on chemotherapy to share with your loved ones so that they can understand, where did this come from? How did this begin? Why doesn't my doctor understand these things? Watch The Truth About Cancer, A Global Quest, episode number 1. It's for free, right now, available to you and everyone you know. We encourage you to share it with everybody that you know. It's on our YouTube channel, The Truth About Cancer. Check it out, look it up, watch it if you haven't already. And please, even if you have watched it, share those things on your Facebooks, Twitter, wherever you're hanging out on the social networks, email. Share it with all of your friends and family.
Yeah, and share this global health news, if you will. And we want to end this episode with a health tip of the day. And the health tip of the day is just laugh more. Laugh more. Because laughter stimulates the immune system. It creates a natural immune response. It actually, we can measure the effect of laughter. And it's a very healthy immune response. And they've shown that children laugh like 400 times a day. By the time we become grown adults, we're old fogey stogies. The typical average adult only laughs less than 40 times a day, and I think most people probably less than 10. So laugh some.
Wow.
So thanks again for joining us for the Truth About Cancer's Global Health News. We appreciate it. We got more coming your way in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned. Share this with everybody that you know, and God bless you.
Bye-bye.